Hello, beautiful patrons. Happy Sunday. This is your Sunday message, and I want to title it In Defense of Slow Learners. In Defense of Slow Learners. But before we go any further, I want to make sure that we're all up to speed on this week's primary subject. This week, in various ways, we've dealt with the quote from Joseph Campbell, where he said, "We must let go of the life we have planned so as to accept the one that is waiting for us." And I want to emphasize very quickly a couple of the key words within this quote. We must let go of the life we have planned. And a couple of times this week we've dealt with that subject of making plans and even asking the question, who was it? Who were we at that point in our lives when we mapped out our life, when we mapped out the future that we hoped to take and made these plans, making plans, establishing goals. I'm sure that you've heard it from multiple sources throughout your life that apparently, statistically, people who write down goals are far more likely to accomplish them. Planning is a very important part of the human experience, obviously. But to me, the next, and maybe in some ways the most important word in this quote is the word accept. So as to accept the one that is waiting for us. And I think it's fair to say that acceptance, in some ways, is a positive spin on the word surrender. Surrender can also be held in a positive context, depending on what the speaker means and the greater context of the larger story. But oftentimes, particularly in American culture, we have an idea of surrender as being negative. Surrender. They gave up. They waved the white flag. They surrendered. But there is a form of surrender that is actually almost transcendent. It is the ability of a human to accept the things, as the old prayer goes, that they cannot change, and working with what they actually have, what life has handed them. So once again, the quote is, we must let go of the life we have planned so as to accept the one that is waiting for us. So I'm a firm believer in this quote, being very light with the word believer, but I know that I've experienced this in my own life. All of you who know my life story, you know that there was a particular life that I obviously had planned. And it was planned by a younger, more naive version of myself, but only to see my quest and my love for both God and my love for people to take me into a different direction. And I had to accept then what life awaited me. So the subject, or the title once again, is Slow Learner. Keying in on the word slow. I want to compare that, or put in opposition to that idea of slow, a term that I really did not become familiar with until I started my consulting business just within the last couple of years and began to consult for different types of businesses. In particular, the main company that I consult for, a small chemical company. Within that working environment, I discovered a new phrase within the construction industry, new to me, called fast track. And I'm sure that I heard that being applied in different ways, because there are fast track educational programs. Legislation can be fast tracked to being passed and made into a law. There are forms of sales that are fast-tracked. There are career plans that are fast-tracked, once again associated usually with an education program. And then within the construction world, there are things called fast track plans, fast track building plans. And so fast track, simply from the definition of the Oxford Dictionary, is a route, a course, or a method that provides for more rapid results than usual. More rapid results than usual. As I was digging into the subject of fast track in order to compare it to my experience as slow learners, I couldn't help but have come to my mind the idea of a plea bargain. And according to History.com, back in 1881, a man by the name of Albert Mackenzie pled guilty to a misdemeanor account of embezzlement. This is in the state of California. Mackenzie had originally been charged with a felony, taking $52.50, and I'm sure back in 1881 that was a large amount. And he took this money from a sewing machine company that he worked at. But instead of going to trial, the prosecution and the defendant, Mackenzie, agreed to a plea bargain. And this started a brand new trend in the United States. Obviously, there's the right to a trial by a jury, and this has always been considered, obviously, a central part of the justice system. But the Seventh Amendment of the Bill of Rights codified it as an essential part of the American civil liberties. When criminals were caught and charged, the government obviously went through a trial and a verdict. Once again, pulling this from History.com. But in the 1800s, a trend towards plea bargains began. And so from 1880 to 1910, nearly 10% of all defendants changed their plea from not guilty to guilty of lesser charges. Today, the plea bargain is an essential part of the criminal justice system, and the great majority of charges, over 90% of these charges are resolved through some type of plea bargain. So just think about that for a minute. Between 1880 and 1910, only 10% of the charges resulted in a plea bargain. But now over 90% of charges end up in a plea bargain. Stay with me for a minute, and maybe we'll preach a little bit towards the end, but I think this is important. Remember, our subject is in defense of slow learners. So in an article I found online, an essay entitled U.S. Courts Plea Bargaining Law, the author comes to this conclusion after a somewhat extensive study of the plea bargaining process. And he says, I quote, "American citizens criticize and recommend not using plea bargains due to the fact that they see it as a way for criminals to get a break, which allows them to receive a minor punishment for the crime or crimes committed. In addition, American citizens say that when a defendant receives a punishment that's unjust to the victim, that justice was not served, that the victim or victims were denied justice, particularly when the defendant's jail or prison sentence is reduced. Some defendants criticize the use of plea bargaining as well, and they say that they were pressured into a plea bargaining because prosecutors would overcharge them and force them into agreeing. The plea bargain has pros and cons, according to this author. Good for prosecutors who do not have a good case, or, and here's what I want to emphasize, too many cases that they have to appear at. But it can also be good for a defendant looking for a way out of his or her penalty by receiving a lesser punishment by plea bargaining. The author goes on to say, this is good for the defense attorney who wants to win by helping his client by reducing his or her punishment. The biggest plus, listen to this, the biggest plus of plea bargaining is that it offers Americans a way to save money in court time. The author says there's not enough tax money for a jury trial for every single case in the court of law. Plea bargaining saves the criminal justice system from the strain that would occur if every case had to go to a jury trial, thus reducing the large amount of court cases. A plea bargaining will reduce caseloads and therefore save Americans money. He asked the question then, is plea bargaining just or unjust? He says, it depends on your point of view on the matter of what you believe is just. Plea agreements are legal, and even though there are some faults with using it, its benefits outweigh the cons in his opinion. What this really comes down to in the case of plea bargaining is that there are limited resources. And the reason I want to emphasize that is because so many times when we think of punishment for crimes, we think of incarceration, which really is something that takes away the most precious commodity that a human being has. And it's not just freedom. I know that's probably the first direction that your mind went, but not only does it take away freedom, but that lack of freedom consumes time within a very, very, very short lifespan. In the grand scheme of things, humans have a very, very short lifespan. So every minute that a person spends incarcerated is a minute of freedom, a minute of expressing life in a way that is not just free but filled with options and control. Every minute of incarceration steals a minute out of a very, very short life. If there's any resource on earth that is limited, it is time itself. And so I want to bring out this point in defense of slow learners. There is a huge temptation to fast track everything, not just to fast track the legal system through plea bargains, not just to fast track our education, not just to fast track our construction processes, not just to fast track our careers, but to actually fast track our transitions. And why shouldn't we be tempted to fast track everything? Because we're always up against this wall. We're always pressured by this extremely limited commodity called life itself. And so it's natural for us to absorb information, to draw information, to lust after information, and then in turn to try to force feed everyone in our world information that might cause them and us to transition from one state of mind or one understanding or one belief system to the next as quickly and as powerfully as possible. But my question for you is, in defense of slow learners, does fast tracking truly bring about the quality of results that we're looking for? Does it create something that is both fair in its systems and also sustainable in its construction? If I were to draw this subject back into my day job, I could find countless examples where fast-tracking construction does not bring about the quality of results that an owner of a new building would actually desire. And this is not fair to the owner. Now, you could make the case that the owner has unreasonable desires, and because he wants the building up and running within 3 months, then the contractors and all of the vendors and all of the subs, they are forced by this system that is unfair to them, to in turn be unfair to the owner, because once again we're pressed against this very limited resource of time. And so the quality of results are not going to be what we would hope for them to be, and at the same time the construction that is created is far less sustainable. Now, how does that have anything to do with any of the subjects that you and I are interested in? If I'm not mistaken, within the very first year of my speaking tour, as I traveled most likely on behalf of Recovering from Religion at that time, I received a great honor of of appearing on the Atheist Experience with Matt and speaking for the local group there in Austin. And after what I thought was a somewhat rewarding presentation given by myself, and then an exciting Q&A session, which is always my favorite part, towards the end of that Q&A session, as I was answering a question related to how long it took me to come to the conclusions that I now have, a voice from the back, an older gentleman, yelled out above the rest of the crowd this statement, because I had just declared that it had taken me 25 years to reverse engineer the religious traditions of my family, that it had taken me 25 years to graduate from religion, to graduate from a belief in supernaturalism. And when I made that declaration, the gentleman, still seated, back of the room, yells out, "You're a slow learner!" And it got a huge roar of laughter, even from myself. And it was true. In so many ways, I really was a slow learner. And as much as we would like through our debates, and debates in many cases that I feel are very brash, as much as we would like for our YouTube videos that express our belief system to be able within 3 minutes to change a person's mind from theist to atheist or whatever your goals may be, as much as we would like to be able to hand someone a 300-page book and within just a few hours for their minds to be what we would consider to be enlightened, as much as we would like to be able to completely encapsulate our best argument into one meme and to post it on Facebook and see it shared 1,000,000 times and know that within one glance we had changed 1,000,000 minds, as much as we would like to fast track the transition process for others, the reality of it is, so seldom is transition fast-tracked within our lives. I stand here today in defense of slow learners. Just like the plea bargaining arrangement, the outcome of fast-tracking is messy and is not nearly as clear as to the quality of its results or the fairness of the system or the sustainability of the construct that is created from those agreements. I stand here today in defense of the slow learner because, as many of you have also experienced, the slow transition creates a better result. The quality of the result, whether we're still talking about graduating from our religion or we're talking about any other type of transition in our lives, something of magnitude, something of weight, something of value, something worth writing about, the quality that is created from the slow transition so often is more akin to the handcrafted ornament by a skilled craftsman versus the fast-tracked result that stamps out a cookie-cutter plastic decision. Not only are the results better, but the system in which we then operate as we make that transition is far more fair. There's a balance that's created. There's an understanding. There's an equilibrium that is created as we take our time and move more slowly towards the end result of the change. There's a fairness as we transition. I've seen so many people like myself, though my transition intellectually, emotionally, from theist to atheist was extremely slow, and so I take pride in being a slow learner in that case. My transition from privately believing these new things to publicly being known for those things, that transition was something even quicker than fast-tracked. And by so doing, it created an unfair system My son was affected unfairly. My wife was affected unfairly. My family, my immediate family, was affected unfairly. Our finances, our favor within the community, all of these things were affected unfairly by this extremely, extremely rapid transition, this fast track, if you will. That's the reason why, to some people's dismay, when I am working, thanks to your sponsorship, when I am working with non-believing ministers, without exception, I challenge them to find within them the slow learner, the slow transitioner, so that the quality of the results will be assured, and so that the system that is created within their life, the methodology of their experience, of their transition, is as fair as possible. Can catastrophe always be avoided? Obviously not. Will everyone's conscience allow them to move slowly from one identity to the next? Obviously not. But because my transition was gradual, was slow, was piece by piece, was more balanced, was filled with true study, true heartfelt emotional battles that were won time after time after time, adding up to a victory of a war magnitude. The construct now that rests within my being is completely sustainable. Just the other day, I had one of my political mentors, a council member that I've talked about on some of these recordings, because I was sharing some of the negative experiences of the public transition from private to public. He asked me, well, has it changed your mind about what you believe or do not believe? And I find that question so incredibly bizarre, because the construct that now rests within my mind, what has been constructed through my study, through my experience, is completely and totally sustainable. It's not something that can flip-flop due to a different type of experience. It's not one argument or one debate or one YouTube video or one book away from being reversed or changed into something different. I stand here strong. I stand here with a quality experience. I stand here with a new fairness within my life. I stand here with sustainability. I stand here because I was a slow learner. So I stand here in defense of slow learning. I stand here as a person who understands that in order to accept the life that is waiting for me, I've had to slowly, painfully, methodically, piece by piece, layer by layer, let go of the life that I had planned. It's not always instantaneous. So I want this message to encourage you. If you're listening to this, there's a very good chance that at least privately you've already made a transition similar to mine, that from my perspective you've already graduated from your religion. And when I say graduated from your religion, what I really mean is graduated from supernaturalism, because that's the only part of the whole scheme that troubles me. If you're listening to me, you've probably already made that transition yourself. So what's more important for me today in this message, in my digital ministry, if you will, is that I encourage you to give yourself time and be patient with yourself as you continue in other areas of your life to slowly, painfully, intricately let go of parts of the life that you've planned in order to surrender, to accept the life that's waiting for you. if you feel as if everyone else is flying by you at 100 miles an hour and that you've got the old cruise control set on 45, don't beat yourself up over this. Yes, we are up against this time crunch. Yes, our time and our resources are limited. Yes, it may tempt us to find a plea bargain. It may tempt us to fast track the process. But even though time is our most precious commodity and it is limited, there is something else that we own that is far greater than a commodity, and it is our individuality. And that personage, that character, those characteristics, those elements of self-expression and individuality deserve, even though time is limited, you deserve time to transition. You deserve a product whose results is one of real quality. You deserve all the fairness within your life system that you can manage, that your conscience can wait for. You deserve a new life, a new you, a new step, a new outcome that is sustainable, that you will then stand on firmly, securely, and be able to step with, to walk upon without any fear of failure or trembling. You deserve to allow yourself to defend your slow learner, your inward, your internal slow learner. So if you have advisors, if you have counselors who look into your life as an unaffected, uninvested third party, judging you, calling you slow, saying you're stupid for not already doing thus and so, claiming that maybe you really just want the pain of this old life. Maybe you just want to not do any better. Maybe you always want to be in this shape. If you have those voices on the outside, I'm asking you to find the ability, as I have found the ability, to turn down the volume of those voices and turn up the volume within you that can literally scream in defense of your slow learner. Because it's not so much about learning slowly as it is moving slowly as you learn. Turn up the volume of your advocate, your internal advocate. Turn up the volume of your internal defense attorney. Turn up the volume and proclaim yourself not guilty. Not guilty of self-sabotage, not guilty of self-destruction, not guilty of inflicting pain through slow movements, but instead proclaim yourself innocent, proclaim yourself justified, proclaim yourself worthy of freedom, of liberty, of options. I stand here today in defense of the slow learners. I stand here in defense of the slow learners and the quality of results that they obtain. I stand here today in defense of the slow learners and the fairness that their patience and their wisdom creates and generates and radiates throughout their life sphere. I stand here in defense of the slow learners, and I praise the sustainability of the lives that they construct, of the relationships that they maintain, of the course that they set. I stand here in defense of the slow learners, because when I see someone consciously moving slow through their transition, I can see that they are being brave.